My name is Cassandra Mitchell. I'm 26 years old, and until 3 months ago, everything I knew about my life was a lie. That morning started like any other. Rushing to my job as a financial analyst in Boston, mentally rehearsing my presentation. Halfway to the office, I realized I'd left my folder at home. Annoyed at myself, I turned around thinking this would only cost me 15 minutes. When I quietly opened our front door, I heard my parents in heated conversation. I was about to call out when my father's words froze me in place. She can never know what we did. It would destroy her. Before I continue this wild journey that turned my entire life upside down, where are you watching from today? If this is your first time here, please hit subscribe to join our story family. Like this video if you've ever discovered a family secret that changed everything. Now let me tell you what happened next when I discovered my entire identity was built on lies. I stood in the hallway of my childhood home, completely frozen. My parents were in the kitchen, unaware of my presence. The hardwood floor creaked slightly under my weight, but they were too engrossed in their argument to notice. "Richard, I can't keep doing this," my mother Margaret said. Her voice carried that familiar quiver it got when she was on the verge of tears. "It's been eating me alive for 25 years. Don't you think she deserves to know the truth?" "Are you insane?" my father hissed back. His voice was low but intense. "After all this time, what good would it do except destroy her life and land us in prison? We made a terrible mistake, Maggie. We can't undo it now." I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. Something told me this conversation wasn't about a surprise party or some minor family secret. The tension in their voices sent a chill down my spine. "She finds out about the adoption papers, it's one thing," my father continued. "But if she discovers how we really got her, the money we paid, the forged documents, she'll never forgive us. Not to mention the legal consequences." My knees nearly buckled beneath me. Adoption papers, forged documents, the words swirled in my mind, refusing to make sense. "I saw a news story last week," my mother said, her voice dropping even lower. I had to strain to hear. "About those cold cases being reopened with new DNA technology. What if someone connects the dots? What if the Lawsons never gave up looking?" "Sophia and Daniel Lawson are both dead," my father replied flatly. "Car accident 10 years ago. There's no one left to look for her." My heart was hammering so loudly I was certain they would hear it. Sophia and Daniel Lawson. The names meant nothing to me, but apparently they meant everything. "The original birth certificate is still in the attic," my mother whispered. "We should have destroyed it years ago." "We keep it hidden." "End of discussion," my father said with finality. "Cass is our daughter in every way that matters. We raised her. We loved her. What happened? It happened. We can't change it now." I felt bile rising in my throat. The room was spinning. My entire identity, the foundation of who I was, seemed to be crumbling beneath me. These people whom I had called Mom and Dad for 26 years were talking about me like I was some kind of stolen property. The word formed in my mind before I could stop it: kidnapped. Was that what they were implying? Had I been kidnapped? My mother began to sob quietly. "But what if she finds out from someone else? Wouldn't it be better coming from us?" "No one will find out," my father snapped. "It's been 25 years. That lawyer Hayes is the only other person who knows, and he's as implicated as we are. More, actually. He's the one who arranged everything." I needed to get out of there. My presentation folder was sitting on the desk in my old bedroom just up the stairs. Moving with more stealth than I knew I possessed, I crept up the steps, grabbed the folder, and made my way back down. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot to my ears. As I reached the front door, I heard my mother's final words. "I just want to be able to look my daughter in the eyes without this terrible guilt. I love her so much, Richard." "Then loving her means protecting her from this truth," he replied. "It would shatter her world." I needed to get out of there. My presentation folder was sitting on the desk in my old bedroom just up the stairs. Moving with more stealth than I knew I possessed, I crept up the steps, grabbed the folder, and made my way back down. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot to my ears. I drove to work in a complete daze, running through red lights and barely noticing other cars honking at me. When I arrived at the office, my colleague Jake took one look at me and asked if I was okay. I must have looked like a ghost. Food poisoning? I mumbled the first excuse that came to mind. I need to reschedule the presentation. My supervisor was understanding enough, though disappointed. I didn't care. Nothing mattered except the bomb that had just detonated in my life. Who was I really? And what had my parents done? After rescheduling my presentation, I called in sick for the rest of the day. I couldn't face talking to anyone or pretending everything was normal. Nothing would ever be normal again. Instead of going home, I drove to the Boston Public Library. I needed privacy, anonymity, and resources. My apartment felt too exposed, and I couldn't risk running into anyone I knew. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type as I sat down at one of the public computers. I Googled Sophia Daniel Lawson baby kidnapped and held my breath. The results loaded instantly, news articles dating back 25 years. My eyes widened as I clicked on the first link, a Boston Globe article with the headline, "Lawson Baby Kidnapping Prominent Boston Family Offers $1 Million Reward." The article featured a photo of a devastated young couple standing in front of a colonial mansion. The woman was beautiful, with long, dark hair and eyes that looked exactly like mine. The man beside her was tall and distinguished, his arm protectively around her shoulders. The caption read, "Daniel and Sophia Lawson plead for the return of their 3-day-old daughter, Katherine Elizabeth." I stared at the woman's face, my heart pounding. The resemblance was undeniable. We had the same heart-shaped face, the same distinctive arch to our eyebrows. I touched my own face, as if confirming these features still existed. According to the article, Katherine Elizabeth Lawson had been taken from Boston Memorial Hospital on June 18th, exactly 26 years ago, my birthday. The baby had disappeared from the hospital nursery during a shift change. Security cameras had been conveniently malfunctioning. The hospital had no explanation. I clicked through more articles, piecing together the story. The Lawsons were Boston aristocracy, old money from shipping and real estate. They had spent a fortune searching for their daughter, hiring private investigators offering increasingly large rewards. For years, they had followed every lead, no matter how tenuous. Then, a decade ago, they had died in a car accident while returning from following yet another false lead about their missing daughter. The case had gone cold. The Lawson fortune, according to later articles, had been placed in trust for their missing heir should she ever be found. I was looking at millions of dollars. But more importantly, I was looking at my true identity. I printed several articles and continued searching. Social media had made researching people infinitely easier. I found old photos of the Lawsons at charity events, noted their mannerisms, their smiles. I pulled up photos of myself on my phone, comparing features. The resemblance was striking, especially to Sophia. Next, I searched for information about my own birth. My parents had always told me I was born at home with a midwife because my mother wanted a natural birth. Now I knew why there had never been proper hospital records. I searched my childhood photos on my phone. The earliest pictures of me were as a 3-month-old. My mother had always said she was too busy taking care of a newborn to take photos. Another lie. By late afternoon, I had enough information to know I needed official documents. I drove to the county records office, arriving 30 minutes before closing. The clerk was unhelpful, bored, and ready to go home. But I persisted, requesting my birth certificate. When she handed me the document, I studied it carefully. Richard and Margaret Mitchell were listed as my birth parents. The certificate looked legitimate, but now I knew better. Forged documents, my father had said. As the clerk was about to close up, I asked casually, "Do you happen to have any records on the Lawson kidnapping case for a research project I'm doing?" She shook her head. "That would be police records, not vital statistics. But I remember that case. Terrible thing. Those poor people never got closure." She looked at me curiously. "You know, you kind of look like Sophia Lawson. Same eyes." I thanked her and left quickly, my heart racing. Back in my car, I made a decision. I needed to see that original birth certificate my mother had mentioned. I needed proof. My parents would be at their weekly bridge game tomorrow evening from 7 to 10. I would search the attic then. I called my best friend Alyssa, needing someone to talk to before I exploded. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, stranger, how'd the big presentation go?" "I postponed it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Listen, can you meet me for coffee tomorrow? There's something I need to talk about. Something big." "You're scaring me, Cass. Are you okay?" No, I wasn't okay. I would never be okay again. But I couldn't explain everything over the phone. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just discovered something about my family that's thrown me for a loop. I could use a friend." "Of course. Green bean at noon. Perfect." I hung up, not trusting myself to say more without breaking down. That night I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling. Everything I thought I knew about myself had been a lie. Cassandra Mitchell didn't exist. She never had. I was Katherine Elizabeth Lawson, heiress to a fortune and victim of a crime I couldn't remember. How was I supposed to process that? And my parents. The people who had packed my lunches, bandaged my knees, cried at my college graduation. They were criminals, kidnappers. They had stolen me, lied to me my entire life. Every birthday we'd celebrated was a monument to their deception. Every I love you tainted by the truth they'd hidden. As dawn broke, I hadn't slept at all, but I had made up my mind. I needed the truth, all of it, no matter how painful. I deserved that much. The next evening at 7:15, I parked a block away from my parents' house and walked the rest of the distance. My parents' car was gone, just as I'd expected. They were creatures of habit, never missing their Thursday night bridge game at the community center. I used my key to let myself in, listening carefully to make sure the house was empty. The familiar smells hit me. My mother's potpourri, the lemon polish she used on the furniture. Everything looked exactly the same as it always had, but now felt like a stage set. A facade hiding something sinister. The pull-down stairs to the attic were in the hallway ceiling. I dragged a chair over and climbed up, switching on the dusty overhead light when I reached the top. The attic was crammed with cardboard boxes, old furniture, and holiday decorations. The accumulated belongings of a family that had lived in the same house for 30 years. A family built on lies. I had no idea where to start looking. My mother had only mentioned that the birth certificate was in the attic. That could mean anywhere in this jumble of memories. I began with the boxes labeled Cass. Baby, my heart twisting at the sight of my mother's neat handwriting. Inside were tiny clothes, a baby book, a silver rattle. I flipped through the baby book, noting again that the earliest entry was at 3 months. There was a lock of baby hair taped to one page, dark like mine still was. Had they cut that from my head after they'd stolen me? Box after box yielded nothing but ordinary family mementos. School projects, report cards, dance, recital programs. With each item, memories flooded back. My father cheering at my soccer games. My mother helping me get ready for prom. Had it all been genuine, could you love a child so much while knowing you'd stolen her from her real parents? After an hour of searching, frustration was setting in. Then I noticed something odd. Against the far wall was an old trunk I'd never seen before. It was pushed behind several larger boxes, partially hidden from view. Unlike the cardboard boxes with their clear labels, this was an antique wooden chest with a brass lock. I dragged it out, finding it surprisingly heavy. The lock was secured, but the key was nowhere to be found. Looking around, I spotted my father's toolbox nearby. I grabbed a screwdriver and, with some effort, managed to pry the lock open. Inside, beneath a layer of old blankets, was a metal box. My hands trembled as I lifted it out. This, too, was locked, but the lock was flimsy. I broke it open with the screwdriver, feeling like a burglar in my own family's home. The contents made my breath catch. On top was a birth certificate. Not the forgery I'd seen at the county office, but an original hospital document for Katherine Elizabeth Lawson, Born to Sophia and Daniel Lawson on June 18th, 26 years ago. My real name, my real parents, my real identity. Beneath that were hospital photos of a newborn with a tiny bracelet reading Lawson K.E. Next came newspaper clippings about the kidnapping, far more extensive than what I'd found online. The Lawsons had offered increasingly desperate rewards. They'd appeared on national television. They'd hired private investigators and psychics. They'd done everything possible to find their daughter. To find me? But the most shocking discovery was at the bottom of the box a diary with my mother's, Margaret's, handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened it to the first entry dated just days after my birth. The baby is finally home with us. I can hardly believe she's real. After so many years of trying so many miscarriages, I finally have a daughter. Richard says I shouldn't write any of this down, that it's too dangerous, but I need to process what we've done. The lawyer Hayes assured us this was a private adoption, that the birth mother wanted no contact. But something feels wrong. The paperwork seemed rushed. The amount of money, $50, 0 inches cash. Who demands cash for a legitimate adoption? Richard says not to question it, that she's ours now, legally, and that's all that matters. When I look at her perfect little face, I want to believe him. I flipped through more entries, each more damning than the last. Within months, my mother had begun to suspect the truth, especially after seeing news reports about the missing Lawson baby. She'd confronted my father, who had already known. He had been in deeper with Hayes than she realized. My father had helped with the forged documents using his skills as a former notary. The final entries were from years later, full of guilt and fear of discovery, but also genuine love for me. My mother had contemplated going to the authorities multiple times, but couldn't bear the thought of losing me or sending my father to prison. She'd convinced herself that what was done, that I was happy and loved, that revealing the truth would only cause more pain. At the very bottom of the box was a collection of letters addressed to various search agencies and police departments. They were from Elizabeth Lawson, who must have been my grandmother, continuing the search after her son and daughter-in-law's deaths. The most recent was dated just 2 years ago. She was still looking for me. I had living relatives who had never stopped searching. Tears streamed down my face as I held the evidence of my true identity in my hands. I wanted to scream, to break things, to confront my parents immediately. But I also felt a strange detachment, as if I were reading about someone else's life, not my own. A car door slammed outside. I had living relatives who had never stopped searching. In a panic, I shoved everything back into the metal box, not bothering with the broken lock. I pushed the trunk roughly back into its place and scrambled down the attic stairs, barely remembering to pull them up behind me. I could hear my parents' key in the front door as I slipped out the back. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I circled around the side of the house, grateful for the darkness, and made it to the street just as lights came on in the living room. Back in my car, I clutched the birth certificate and diary to my chest, physical proof that everything I'd learned was real. My entire life had been built on a kidnapping, a crime that had destroyed one family while creating a false version of another. What was I supposed to do now? The next day, I met Alyssa at a hotel room I'd booked rather than at the coffee shop we'd planned. I couldn't risk being overheard, and I needed somewhere private to process everything. When she arrived, her eyes widened at my appearance. I hadn't slept, and it showed. "Jesus, Cass, you look terrible. What the hell is going on?" I gestured to the documents spread across the bed. "I need to show you something, and I need you to believe me because it sounds insane." For the next hour, I walked her through everything. The overheard conversation, my research, the documents I'd found. Alyssa listened in shocked silence, examining each piece of evidence as I presented it. "Holy shit," she finally whispered. "This is like something from a movie. Your parents, they actually kidnapped you." "They didn't physically take me from the hospital," I clarified, based on what I'd pieced together. "This lawyer, Hayes, arranged it somehow. But they knew. They've always known." Alyssa picked up the original birth certificate, studying it. "Katherine Elizabeth Lawson," she read aloud. That's your real name. I don't know who I am anymore, Alyssa. Cassandra Mitchell was their creation. She doesn't exist. But I don't feel like Katherine Lawson either. Alyssa opened her laptop. Let's find out more about the Lawsons. If they were as wealthy as the articles suggest, there must be a paper trail. For the next several hours, we dug deeper into the Lawson family history. They had been prominent in Boston society for generations. Daniel Lawson had run the family's investment firm, while Sophia had been a well-known philanthropist. They had been married for 5 years before having their only child, me. Most importantly, we discovered that Daniel's mother, Elizabeth Lawson, was still alive. At 82, she lived in the family's mansion in Beacon Hill. There were also cousins, uncles, aunts, an entire extended family I knew nothing about. The Lawson fortune is held in trust, Alyssa read, from a financial news article. Estimated at over $30 million, it's been managed by the family firm pending the discovery of Katherine Lawson or confirmation of her death. With neither forthcoming, the trust continues in limbo. I shook my head in disbelief. This isn't about money. Of course not, Alyssa agreed quickly. But it explains why your parents kept everything hidden. Besides the criminal charges, there's a fortune at stake. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. My father. It was the 5th time he'd called since morning. I sent it to voicemail again. You can't avoid them forever, Alyssa pointed out gently. I know. But I can't face them yet either. I don't know what I'd do or say. The conflict tore at me. These people had raised me, loved me, shaped who I was. Every memory I had included them. My mother nursing me through chickenpox, my father teaching me to ride a bike, family vacations, holiday dinners, graduation celebrations. But they had stolen me, denied me my true identity, my heritage, my real family. They had watched the Lawsons suffer and said nothing. What kind of people could do that? I think you should talk to a lawyer before confronting them, Alyssa suggested. There are serious legal implications here. Kidnapping doesn't have a statute of limitations. The thought of my parents in prison made me physically ill despite everything. Could I really be the one to put them there? I know a good attorney, Alyssa continued. Rachel Bennett. She specializes in family law. Let me call her. 2 hours later, we were sitting in Rachel Bennett's downtown office. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who listened to my story without visible reaction, examining each document carefully. This is extraordinary, she finally said. In my 20 years of practice, I've never encountered a case quite like this. What are the legal ramifications? I asked. For my parents, I mean. Significant. Kidnapping is a federal offense with no statute of limitations. If they knowingly participated in your abduction or received you with knowledge that you had been kidnapped, they could face up to life in prison. The forged documents constitute additional fraud charges. I felt the blood drain from my face. Life in prison. However, Rachel continued, cases this old are complicated. Evidence degrades, witnesses disappear. The lawyer you mentioned, Hayes, would be the key to everything. So what should I do? That depends on what you want, Miss Mitchell. Or should I say, Miss Lawson, do you want justice, reconciliation to meet your biological family? There are multiple paths forward. I stared out the window at the Boston skyline. What did I want? I honestly didn't know. I need time to think, I said finally. But I also need protection. My father. When he's backed into a corner, he can be unpredictable. Rachel nodded. I understand. Everything you've told me is confidential. Take a few days to consider your options. Gather any additional evidence if you can do so safely. We can meet again when you're ready to proceed. As Alyssa and I left the office, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I had professional guidance now, but the weight of the decisions ahead felt crushing. You can stay with me if you don't want to be alone, Alyssa offered. I shook my head. I need space to process. But thank you. Back at my apartment, I found a note taped to my door. My mother's handwriting, Cassie, please call us. We love you. Whatever you heard, there's more to the story. Please give us a chance to explain. I crumpled the note and threw it away. There was no explanation that could justify what they had done. That night, as I tried unsuccessfully to sleep, I made my decision. I would contact the Lawson family. They deserved to know what had happened to their missing child. To me, it was time to learn who Catherine Elizabeth Lawson was supposed to be. When I called Rachel Bennett the next morning to update her on my decision to contact the Lawson family, her assistant said she was in court but would call me back. I spent the day in anxious limbo, jumping each time my phone rang. My parents had called 17 times between them. I continued to ignore them, not ready for that confrontation. Late that afternoon, my phone buzzed with texts from both my parents in quick succession. "Dad, we need to talk now. You have no idea what you're getting into." "Mom, please come home, Cassie. We're worried sick. We love you." "Dad, if you've contacted anyone about this, you've put us all in danger." The last message chilled me. It wasn't a plea. It was a threat. An hour later, another text from my father. "We know you took documents from our house. That's theft. Return them immediately or we'll have no choice but to take legal action." Legal action. After what they had done, the hypocrisy was staggering. When Rachel still hadn't called back by evening, I decided to return to my hotel. As I approached my room, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. Instantly alert, I backed away, calling hotel security. The security guard confirmed my fears someone had broken into my room. Everything was in disarray, drawers emptied onto the floor, mattress upended. And the documents, the birth certificate, the diary, all the evidence I had gathered were gone. The hotel manager called police, who took a report but didn't seem overly concerned. "Hotel thefts happen all the time," the officer told me dismissively. "Was anything valuable taken?" "Only my identity," I thought bitterly. When the police left, I called Alyssa in a panic. "Someone broke in and took everything, all the evidence." "Oh my God. Your parents." "I don't know. The front desk said a woman asked for a key claiming to be me and saying she'd locked herself out. They didn't check ID." "Call Rachel," Alyssa urged. "She needs to know about this." I tried, but again got her voicemail. Something felt wrong. Why wasn't she responding? On a hunch, I asked the hotel to check their security footage. 2 hours and much persuasion later, I was looking at grainy images of a woman entering my room. Rachel Bennett. My lawyer had robbed me. "She must be connected to Hayes somehow," Alyssa said as we stared at the footage in disbelief. "Let me do some digging." While Alyssa worked her research magic, I moved to a different hotel, paranoia now in full bloom. My phone continued to blow up with increasingly threatening messages from my father. "Dad, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Hayes has connections that can make you disappear." "Dad, your mother is having a breakdown because of you. Is that what you want?" "Mom, please come home, baby. We can explain everything. We never meant to hurt you." I couldn't believe I'd ever trusted these people. Every word they'd ever said to me felt contaminated. Alyssa called around midnight. I found the connection. Rachel Bennett worked at Callahan and Hayes for 3 years before starting her own practice. Vincent Hayes was a senior partner there. She's been working with him all along, I realized. My parents must have contacted Hayes after overhearing me, and he sent Rachel to intercept me. "This is getting dangerous, Cass. These people are organized and desperate. You need protection. From who I can't go to the police without evidence, and Rachel took everything." "Not everything," Alyssa reminded me. "You still have your DNA. If you're really Katherine Lawson, a DNA test would prove it." She was right. They could take the documents, but they couldn't change who I was on a genetic level. "And there's one more thing," Alyssa added. "I found Michael Lawson on Facebook. He's your cousin, Daniel Lawson's nephew. He lives in Cambridge. You think I should contact him directly? At this point, what do you have to lose?" She had a point. My parents knew I had discovered the truth. The lawyer was compromised. Without the physical evidence, my story sounded delusional. But DNA doesn't lie. I spent the night drafting and redrafting a message to Michael Lawson, trying to find words that wouldn't make me sound like a complete lunatic. How do you tell a stranger that you might be their long-lost, kidnapped cousin? In the end, I kept it simple. "My name is Cassandra Mitchell. I recently discovered evidence suggesting I may be Katherine Elizabeth Lawson, who was kidnapped from Boston Memorial Hospital in 1996. I would like to meet with you to discuss the possibility of a DNA test to confirm or rule out this relationship. I understand this message must come as a shock, but I assure you my intentions are genuine. I included my phone number and pressed send before I could lose my nerve. Then I waited, jumping at every sound outside my hotel room door, checking the hallway before venturing out, wondering if Hayes or my father had connections looking for me. Michael Lawson responded the next morning. I've received messages like this before. My family has dealt with false hopes for 25 years. If you're genuine, meet me at the Thinking Cup Cafe on Newbury Street at noon today. Public place, lots of witnesses. Come alone. His caution was understandable. How many false Katherine Lawsons had they encountered over the years? How many scammers trying to claim the Lawson fortune? But I wasn't after money. I just wanted the truth. I arrived at the Thinking Cup 30 minutes early, securing a table in the corner where I could watch the door. My nerves were shot from lack of sleep and constant vigilance. Every person who entered made me tense up, wondering if they were sent by Hayes or my father. At exactly noon, a tall man in his 30s entered. He scanned the cafe with an intensity that immediately marked him as Michael Lawson. When his eyes fell on me, he froze momentarily, then approached with measured steps. "Cassandra?" he asked cautiously. I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from me. As he sat down, we studied each other. He had dark hair and the same gray-blue eyes I saw in my mirror every morning. The family resemblance was subtle but unmistakable. "I appreciate you meeting me," I began. "I know how this must sound." Michael's expression remained guarded. "You'd be surprised how many Katherine Lawsons I've met over the years. Some genuinely believed they were her. Others were just after the money. I understand your skepticism. Until a few days ago, I had no idea I might be anyone other than Cassandra Mitchell." What changed his tone was neutral, giving nothing away. I told him the whole story. The overheard conversation, my research, the documents I'd found and subsequently lost. As I spoke, his expression shifted from skepticism to cautious interest. When I described Rachel Bennett's betrayal, his eyes narrowed. "Hayes," he said almost to himself. "That name has come up before. My uncle was convinced someone at the hospital had insider help." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. From it, he extracted a photograph and placed it on the table between us. It showed a young couple holding a newborn. "This is Daniel and Sophia with Katherine, the only photo they had with their daughter." I stared at the image, my throat tight. The woman, my mother, was looking down at the baby with such love it was almost painful to see. I had her eyes, her mouth, even the slight dimple in her chin. Michael was watching me closely. "The resemblance is striking." "I know." He took out his phone and pulled up more family photos. Daniel and Sophia at various ages. Elizabeth Lawson, even Michael himself as a child. With each image, the family resemblance became more undeniable. "Your grandmother still lives in the family home," Michael said quietly. "She's 82 now, but her mind is sharp. She's never stopped believing Katherine would be found someday." Tears welled in my eyes. "I'd like to meet her, but I understand if you need proof first." Michael hesitated, then nodded. "I've arranged for a private DNA test. The lab can have results in 48 hours, if you're willing." "Of course." He studied me for another long moment. "You really didn't know any of this until a few days ago." "My whole life has been a lie," I said simply. "The people I thought were my parents. They seemed so normal, so loving. How could they have done something so terrible?" Michael's expression softened slightly. "My aunt and uncle spent every day for 15 years searching for their daughter. It destroyed them. After the accident, my grandmother continued the search. The not knowing was the worst part." "I'm sorry," I whispered, though the apology felt inadequate. "What do you say to someone whose family was torn apart by your very existence?" We left the cafe together and took a taxi to a private medical facility. The DNA test was quick and professional. Michael explained that the Lawson family had kept DNA samples from both Daniel and Sophia specifically for this purpose. What happens now? I asked as we exited the building. We wait. But, he hesitated. My grandmother would want to meet you. DNA results or not? Is that wise? What if I'm not Catherine? Michael's expression was complex. You look exactly like my Aunt Sophia did at your age. And there's something about you. I can't explain it, but I feel it. Don't you? I did. A strange sense of familiarity, of connection that defied logical explanation. Hayes has powerful connections, Michael warned as we made arrangements. If what you've told me is true, these people have gone to extraordinary lengths to hide their crime. They won't stop now, that you know. My father threatened as much in his texts. Michael nodded grimly. Stay at the Lawson estate tonight. It's secure, and Hayes won't be able to reach you there. The Lawson mansion in Beacon Hill was exactly what you'd expect from old Boston money. Elegant, understated, and imposing. As the taxi pulled up to the wrought iron gates, I felt a surreal disconnection. Was this really part of my heritage? The elderly woman who greeted us in the foyer was frail but regal. Elizabeth Lawson had the bearing of someone who had faced unimaginable tragedy with dignity, Grandmother Michael said gently. This is Cassandra Mitchell. She believes she may be Catherine. Elizabeth's pale eyes studied me with laser intensity. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with a trembling hand, she reached out and touched my cheek. Sophia's eyes, she whispered. Daniel's chin. You've come home at last. I didn't correct her assumption. The DNA test would provide certainty soon enough. But as she embraced me, I felt an inexplicable sense of recognition, as if some part of me remembered this place, these people. I've prepared the blue room for you, Elizabeth said. It was to be Catherine's when she grew up. As Michael showed me to the room, a beautiful space with views of the garden, he explained the security measures at the estate. The gates are monitored. There are cameras. No one gets in without authorization. Thank you, I said sincerely, for believing me enough to bring me here. Don't thank me yet, he replied. If the test confirms you're Catherine, your life is about to become very complicated. The Lawson name still carries weight in Boston. When this story breaks, it will be a media circus, and the people who took you will face serious consequences. The thought made my stomach twist. Despite everything, the idea of my parents in prison still affected me deeply. Get some rest, Michael advised. Tomorrow we'll start making plans. For any outcome. That night in a room that had been intended for me 26 years ago, I finally slept without fear. 2 days later, the DNA results arrived via secure courier. The three of us, Elizabeth, Michael, and I, gathered in the study as Michael opened the envelope. The tension was palpable. 99.997% match to both Daniel and Sophia Lawson. He read aloud, his voice catching. Genetic relationship. Parent-child. Elizabeth closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. Thank God, she whispered. Thank God. I sat in stunned silence. Even though I'd known it was true, having scientific confirmation made it real in a way nothing else had. I was Catherine Elizabeth Lawson, the missing heiress, the kidnapped baby. What do you want to do now? Catherine Michael asked gently. Cass, I corrected automatically. I'm still Cass. I took a deep breath. I want to confront them. I need to hear them say it. I need to know why. Elizabeth nodded. You deserve answers. But not alone. This family has lost you once. We won't risk losing you again. With the DNA results confirming my identity, we contacted a different attorney, one with no connections to Hayes. Harrison Wells specialized in criminal law and had an impeccable reputation. We should arrange a controlled confrontation, Harrison advised after reviewing everything. Neutral location security present. I'll have a court reporter document everything said. My parents won't agree to that, I pointed out. They will if they think it's the only way to see you, Michael said. You haven't responded to any of their messages, have you? I shook my head. The barrage had continued. alternating between my mother's emotional pleas and my father's veiled threats. Harrison drafted a message from me, informing Richard and Margaret Mitchell that I would meet with them at his office the following day at 10 a.m. This meeting will be recorded, and witness the message concluded. It represents your opportunity to explain your actions before further legal steps are taken. The response came within minutes. They would be there. That night, I barely slept. What do you say to the people who raised you knowing they stole you from your real parents? Part of me still loved them despite everything. They were the only parents I had ever known. But they had built our entire relationship on a foundation of lies and crime. Harrison's office was sleek and imposing with security at the entrance. Michael and Elizabeth insisted on accompanying me, though they agreed to wait in an adjoining room during the initial confrontation. Harrison would be present, along with a court reporter and a security officer. At precisely 10 a.m., Richard and Margaret Mitchell were escorted in. My mother looked like she'd aged 10 years in the weeks since I'd last seen her. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. My father appeared haggard but defiant, his jaw set in the stubborn expression I knew so well. "Cassie," my mother whispered, moving to embrace me. I stepped back. "Don't." Harrison began formally explaining the purpose of the meeting and informing my parents that everything said would be on the record. "We have nothing to hide," my father declared, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "I have confirmed through DNA testing that I am Katherine Elizabeth Lawson," I said, forcing myself to meet their eyes. "Kidnapped from Boston Memorial Hospital in 1996. My biological parents spent 15 years searching for me before they died. And you knew. You always knew." My mother broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. My father put his arm around her, his expression hardening. "Whatever you think you know," he began. "I know everything." I cut him off. "I found the birth certificate. I found the diary. I know about Hayes." At the mention of Hayes, my father paled visibly. "Just tell me, why?" I demanded, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. "Why would you do something so cruel?" My mother looked up, her face streaked with tears. "We lost a baby," she whispered. "A stillbirth. We were desperate. Hayes was a lawyer who approached us at a support group for parents who'd lost children. He said he could arrange a private adoption, no waiting lists, no red tape. And you didn't question why a legitimate adoption would need to be so secretive," Harrison interjected. "Of course we did," my father snapped. "But we wanted a child so badly. Hayes assured us everything was legal, just expedited. We paid him, signed the papers, and then he brought you to us." "When did you realize the truth?" I asked. My parents exchanged glances. "The news reports started almost immediately," my mother admitted. "The missing Lawson baby." I suspected, but Richard insisted it was a coincidence. "I didn't want to believe it," my father said defensively. "By the time Hayes admitted what he'd done, we'd already had you for months. We loved you. You were our daughter." "I was never your daughter," I said coldly. "You stole me." "We gave you a good life," my father exploded. "We loved you, protected you, gave you everything you needed. Would you have been better off with them, with their money and privilege? We made you who you are. You deprived me of my identity, my heritage, my real family." "We are your real family," my mother cried. "Biology doesn't make a family. Love does." "Love built on lies isn't love," I replied. "It's possession." Harrison intervened, directing specific questions about Hayes, about the forged documents, about what exactly they had known and when. My father grew increasingly evasive while my mother continued to sob. Then the door opened, and Elizabeth Lawson entered, leaning on Michael's arm. My parents froze immediately, recognizing her from the news coverage years ago. "Mrs. Lawson," my father began awkwardly. "You stole my grandchild," Elizabeth said, her voice surprisingly strong. "You watched my son and daughter-in-law die of grief, and you said nothing. There is nothing you can say to justify that." The confrontation escalated, with my father becoming increasingly defensive and my mother breaking down completely. As Harrison pressed for details about Hayes' operation, a courier arrived with an envelope. DNA test results, Harrison announced after opening it, confirming Katherine Elizabeth Lawson's identity beyond any doubt. My father's demeanor suddenly changed. The defensiveness dropped away, replaced by something colder, more calculated. The confrontation escalated, with my father becoming increasingly defensive and my mother breaking down completely. As Harrison pressed for details about Hayes' operation, a courier arrived with an envelope. "Richard, please," my mother begged. "Tell her we're sorry. Tell her we love her." "Be quiet, Margaret," he snapped. Then, looking directly at me, "You think this ends with us in prison and you living happily ever after with your new rich family? Think again. I have information that would destroy your precious career. Files from clients you've mishandled. Errors in your analyses that I've quietly corrected over the years." I stared at him in shock. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm stating facts. Push this and nobody wins." He stood up. "We're done here." As they were escorted out, my mother turned back, her face devastated. "We do love you, Cassie. We always have." I couldn't respond. The woman who had kissed my skinned knees and held me through nightmares was a criminal who had participated in my kidnapping. The man who had taught me to ride a bike had just threatened to destroy my career to save himself. "That went about as expected," Harrison said grimly. "But we got enough on record to move forward with authorities if that's what you want." Elizabeth took my hand. "What do you want, my dear? You've found your true family. The choice of what happens next is yours." I looked at her, at Michael, feeling the weight of both my past and my future. "I want justice," I said finally. "Not just for me, but for my parents, my real parents. For you. And for any other families Hayes might have destroyed." As we left Harrison's office, I felt hollowed out but resolute. The Mitchells were no longer my parents. They were criminals who had stolen my life. And I was no longer Cassandra Mitchell. I was Katherine Elizabeth Lawson, and I was finally ready to reclaim my true identity. In the days following the confrontation, the Lawsons hired a top private investigator, James Donovan, to dig deeper into Hayes and his operation. With the resources of the Lawson family behind him, Donovan quickly uncovered a conspiracy far larger than any of us had imagined. Hayes wasn't operating alone, Donovan explained, spreading files across the dining table at the Lawson mansion. He had a network: a nurse at Boston Memorial, another at Massachusetts General, contacts at the county records office. This was a sophisticated operation that ran for over a decade. According to the evidence Donovan had gathered, Vincent Hayes had specialized in providing babies to wealthy, desperate couples who had been unsuccessful with legitimate adoptions. The clients were carefully selected, affluent enough to pay substantial sums, but not so connected that they might expose the operation. "We've identified 6 other cases with identical patterns," Donovan continued. Babies reported as stillborn to one set of parents, then sold to another family for between $40,000 and $100,000 each. "All kidnappings?" Elizabeth asked, horrified. "Most likely, yes." Hayes would target babies born to wealthy families, fabricate a death certificate for the real parents, then sell the infant to a waiting couple with forged adoption papers. Michael shook his head in disbelief. How did no one catch this? The records were expertly falsified, and Hayes had people in the right positions to ensure any investigations went nowhere. The most shocking revelation came when Donovan showed us evidence that my father, Richard Mitchell, had been more deeply involved than even my mother knew. As a former bank compliance officer, he had helped launder the money from the operation and facilitated the document forgery. "He wasn't just a client," Donovan explained. "He was a partner. That's why he received you specifically. The Lawson case was high-profile, risky. Hayes needed someone he trusted implicitly to take you." The betrayal cut even deeper. My father hadn't just accepted a kidnapped baby out of desperation. He had been an active participant in the criminal enterprise that had stolen me and other infants from their families. With Donovan's evidence mounting, Harrison advised us to take everything to the FBI. "This crosses state lines and involves multiple types of fraud. It's clearly in federal jurisdiction." The day we met with the FBI agents, I was a nervous wreck. This would make everything public irreversible. My life as Cassandra Mitchell would be over forever. But Katherine Lawson deserved justice. Special Agent Tara Wilson listened intently as we presented our evidence. "We've had suspicions about Hayes for years," she admitted. "But we've never had a victim come forward with this level of documentation." The agents explained that I might need witness protection as the case proceeded. Hayes still had powerful connections, and my parents, the Mitchells, were cornered and desperate. The day we met with the FBI agents, I was a nervous wreck. This would make everything public irreversible. My life as Cassandra Mitchell would be over forever. But Katherine Lawson deserved justice. "We'll need to move quickly," Agent Wilson explained. "Once we start making arrests, things could get dangerous for you." By afternoon, Richard and Margaret Mitchell had also been arrested. The story exploded across national media. Kidnapped, heiress, found after 25 years. My photo, both as Cassandra Mitchell and side by side with images of Sophia Lawson, was everywhere. Reporters camped outside the Lawson estate. My apartment was staked out. My workplace was inundated with media inquiries. My carefully constructed life as a financial analyst was collapsing under the weight of my true identity. I received a call from my supervisor, Alan Barrett. "Cass, or should I say, Katherine, I don't even know what to call you anymore." "I'm still me," I said weakly, though I wasn't sure that was true. "The firm is getting hammered with press calls, and we've received some concerning information about your work." My stomach dropped. "What information?" "Spreadsheets analysis, reports, client files, all with significant errors that were apparently corrected before submission. Richard Mitchell sent them to the partners this morning, claiming he's been covering for your mistakes for years." My father had followed through on his threat. Even from jail, he was trying to destroy what remained of my life. "None of that is true," I insisted. "He fabricated those to discredit me." Alan sighed. "I believe you, but the damage is done. The partners feel we need to place you on administrative leave while this is sorted out. I'm sorry." Another piece of Cassandra Mitchell's life, gone. The FBI offered me temporary witness protection as the case against Hayes and the Mitchells proceeded. The evidence from Hayes' home was damning. Detailed records of at least 27 illegal adoptions spanning 15 years. Computer files, payment records, even photographs of the babies with coded identifiers. 6 other victims were identified, now adults in their 20s and 30s who, like me, had no idea of their true origins. The FBI was contacting them discreetly, offering DNA testing to confirm their identities. "This is bigger than we imagined," Agent Wilson told me during a debriefing. Hayes had connections to similar operations in 3 other states. This could be the largest illegal adoption ring we've ever uncovered. The media coverage was relentless. My entire life history was being dissected in newspapers, on television, online. Journalists tracked down my college, roommates, ex-boyfriends, former colleagues, all eager to share their insights into Katherine Lawson, the kidnapped heiress. Some coverage was sympathetic, portraying me as the victim of a horrible crime. Other outlets questioned whether I was complicit, suggesting I'd known all along and was after the Lawson fortune. The most hurtful were the pieces that portrayed the Mitchells as loving parents who had saved me from a life of cold privilege. Through it all, Elizabeth and Michael Lawson remained steadfast supports, fiercely protective of my privacy and well-being. Elizabeth, despite her age and frailty, handled the media with the grace of someone born to prominence. Michael became my shield against the worst of the intrusions. "This will pass," he assured me as we watched yet another news segment about the Lawson kidnapping from the safety of the estate. "Once the trials begin, the focus will shift to Hayes and his operation." But would it? I was the living embodiment of a sensational crime, the missing heiress found after 25 years. My identity, my very existence, was now public property to be debated and dissected by strangers. As the weeks passed, I struggled to reconcile the two halves of myself. Cassandra Mitchell, with her orderly life and careful plans, Katherine Lawson, heir to a fortune, and victim of a notorious crime. Who was I really? Could I ever be whole again? The answer began to emerge as I connected with my Lawson relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles, all eager to welcome the lost family member home. They shared stories of Daniel and Sophia helping me know the parents I'd lost. Old home movies showed a young couple radiant with joy as they prepared for their baby's arrival. They would have been wonderful parents, Elizabeth told me one evening as we looked through photo albums. Daniel was so excited about teaching you to sail. Sophia had already planned your education down to the college you'd attend. I wiped away tears. I wish I could have known them. They're part of you, Elizabeth said gently. Always have been. Now you can finally acknowledge that part of yourself. Gradually, I began to feel less like I was choosing between Cassandra and Katherine, and more like I was integrating them into a new, more complete identity. I had been shaped by both the Mitchells' nurturing and the Lawsons' genetics. My resilience in facing this upheaval came from both sources. As the criminal cases progressed, I made a difficult decision. I would testify against Hayes and my father, but I requested leniency from my mother. The evidence suggested she had been manipulated, kept in the dark about the full extent of the operation. She did love me, I explained to Harrison. Misguided as it was, she believed she was saving me from a worse fate. Harrison nodded. The prosecution will likely be amenable. Her testimony against Hayes and your father would be valuable. When the day came to face Richard Mitchell in court, I entered the courtroom with my head high. He barely looked at me, his face a mask of resentment and defeat. I testified clearly and factually, describing the discovery of my true identity, the confrontation, and his subsequent threats. When asked if I believed he had known I was kidnapped when he received me, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said firmly. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was part of the operation from the beginning. As I stepped down from the witness stand, Richard finally met my eyes. There was no remorse there, only cold anger at being caught. In that moment, I realized I had lost nothing of value in giving up his fatherhood. The man who had raised me was as much a fabrication as my identity as Cassandra Mitchell had been. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by security and family, I faced the wall of cameras and reporters. "Miss Lawson," someone called. "Do you hate the people who raised you?" I considered the question carefully. Hate is too simple an emotion for something this complex. I'm grateful for the care I received, but I cannot forgive the crime that made that care necessary. What was stolen from me, and from the other victims, was not just our identities, but our right to know the truth about ourselves. That is unforgivable. As I walked away flanked by my true family, I felt a weight lifting. The conspiracy that had shaped my existence was unraveling, exposing painful truths, but also offering liberation. I was no longer living someone else's lie. 6 months after the initial arrests, the court cases were drawing to a close. Vincent Hayes, the architect of the baby-selling operation, was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. My father, I still struggled with what to call Richard Mitchell, received 15 years for his role in the conspiracy money laundering and document fraud. My mother, Margaret, in exchange for her testimony against Hayes, and my father received 5 years probation and community service. Her tearful testimony about being manipulated and kept in the dark about the full extent of the operation had swayed both the prosecution and the jury. I sat in the back of the courtroom for her sentencing, unsure whether I wanted her to see me. As she was led out, our eyes met briefly. The grief and remorse in her expression were genuine. She mouthed, "I'm sorry," before being escorted away. Would I ever be able to forgive her? I wasn't sure. But I understood now that she had loved me in her way, however twisted the circumstances. After the trials concluded, I finally had time to focus on rebuilding my life. The Lawson fortune, held in trust for 26 years, was now legally mine. The amount was staggering. Nearly $40 million grown through careful investment over the years. Your parents wanted to ensure your future, the family attorney explained. Even when the chances of finding you seemed remote, they never gave up hope. With Elizabeth's guidance, I established the Sophia and Daniel Lawson Foundation, dedicated to helping find missing children and supporting families torn apart by kidnapping. It felt right to use the money to prevent others from suffering, as both my families had. They would be proud, Elizabeth told me, her eyes moist. This honors them perfectly. My grandmother, it still felt strange to use that word, had become my strongest connection to my biological heritage. At 83, her health was fragile, but her mind remained sharp. We spent hours together as she shared family stories, helping me understand where I came from. You have your grandfather's analytical mind, she told me one afternoon, as we looked through old photographs. And Sophia's determination, Daniel's laugh. They're all part of you, whether you knew it or not. The FBI had located 4 of the 6 other victims of Hayes' operation. Like me, they had been raised by families who purchased them unaware of their true origins. Unlike me, most of their biological parents were still alive. I helped form a support group for these fellow survivors. Our experiences were unique, yet we shared the disorienting sensation of having our identities fractured and rebuilt. Together, we navigated the complex emotions of reconnecting with biological families while processing the betrayal by those who raised us. Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? Asked Sarah, one of the group members, during a meeting. Sometimes, I admitted. But then I remember that both parts, Cassandra and Katherine, they're both me. I'm not choosing between them anymore. Professionally, I had to start over. The false information my father had sent to my firm had effectively ended my career there, despite later being proven fabricated. But with my financial expertise and newfound resources, I established a small consulting practice specializing in helping nonprofits manage their endowments. The media attention eventually faded as newer scandals captured public interest. I was able to reclaim some privacy, though the name Katherine Lawson would always carry the echo of the sensational case. I had decided to use both names professionally, Cassandra Katherine Lawson, acknowledging both parts of my identity. It felt right, a bridge between who I had been and who I was becoming. One relationship I hadn't fully resolved was with Margaret Mitchell. After 3 months of consideration, I agreed to see her in a supervised setting arranged by her therapist. I had decided to use both names professionally, Cassandra Katherine Lawson, acknowledging both parts of my identity. It felt right, a bridge between who I had been and who I was becoming. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, she said, her hands trembling as she clutched a tissue. What we did was unforgivable, but I need you to know that my love for you was always real. It was the one true thing in all the lies. I believe you, I said carefully. But love without honesty isn't enough. You watched me struggle with questions about my identity for years. You saw the Lawsons suffering. You had countless opportunities to tell the truth. I was a coward, she admitted. Afraid of losing you, afraid of prison, afraid of Richard. Always afraid. I failed you as a mother. There was nothing more to say after that. We both understood that whatever relationship we might salvage would never again be mother and daughter. Too much had been broken. Richard, on the other hand, had made no attempts to contact me. According to Margaret, he blamed me entirely for the unraveling of his life. His rage and resentment had calcified into hatred. I had formally returned to my birth name, Lawson, severing the last connection to him. As the 1-year anniversary of my discovery approached, I decided to visit the Mitchell's house one last time before it was sold. Elizabeth worried about the emotional impact, but I felt it was necessary for closure. The house stood empty, the furniture gone, dust gathering in corners. I walked through the rooms where I had grown up, memories flooding back with each step. In my childhood bedroom, a single box remained. Too personal for the estate sale, too painful for Margaret to keep. Inside were mementos of my life as Cassandra, report cards, artwork, photographs. At the very bottom was a small velvet pouch containing a silver locket. I recognized it immediately. Margaret had given it to me on my 16th birthday, telling me it was a family heirloom. Inside was a tiny photograph of me as a toddler laughing in Margaret's arms. On the back of the locket, an inscription, "To our daughter with eternal love." I closed my fingers around it, tears flowing freely. This small object encapsulated the contradiction of my life, a genuine token of love born from an unconscionable crime. After leaving the house, I drove to the cemetery where Sophia and Daniel Lawson were buried. I had visited before, but always with Elizabeth or Michael. This time, I needed to be alone. Standing before their headstones, I placed fresh flowers and touched their names carved in cold marble. "I wish I could have known you," I said softly to the parents I would never meet. "But I'm getting to know you through the family you left behind. Through parts of myself I'm still discovering. I hope you'd be proud of who I've become despite everything." Back at the Lawson estate, I found Elizabeth waiting for me on the terrace. "How do you feel?" she asked gently. I considered the question carefully. Like, I'm finally whole. Not Cassandra, not Katherine, just me with all my complicated parts. She took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. That's all anyone can ask for in this life, to know themselves truly and completely. Later that evening, as I sorted through some of my parents' old papers with Michael, I came across a letter Sophia had written to her unborn child. To me. It was dated just days before my birth. "My darling," she had written, "I don't yet know if you're a boy or a girl, but I already know you are loved beyond measure. Whatever path your life takes, remember that you define yourself. Not your circumstances, not your challenges, not even your parents. Your father and I will give you roots, but you must grow your own wings." They had been denied the chance to give me roots. But across 26 years and against impossible odds, they had given me wings nonetheless. The strength to face the truth, the courage to reclaim my identity, and the capacity to build something new from the fragments of my shattered past. I was Cassandra Katherine Lawson, shaped by nature and nurture by truth, and lies by loss and discovery. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was. If you've ever discovered a family secret that changed everything, share your story in the comments below. How did you handle the truth? Did it change your identity? Remember to like this video if my journey resonated with you, and subscribe for more real-life stories of discovery and resilience. Thank you for listening to my story. May you find strength in your own truth, whatever it may be.